our CEO, Jeff Weiner at the time, said, Steve, if our customers know that we don't know how to recruit and we're selling a recruiting product, yeah, that's not a good look, okay? So we got to get really good at this. And I'm thinking, well, gee, Jeff, our neighbors are Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter. They can outpay us, outbenefit us, outperk us, outwork environment us, out on-site childcare center us, out bus to San Francisco for the employees, out LeBron James is coming for breakfast today. And I got nothing. So you got to give me something, and that was the forcing function for us to really raise our game and say, well, we can't outpay people, we can't perk and benefit people. What asset do we have? And I think for all the entrepreneurs listening, today, I think that's not an atypical situation. You're looking around going, oh man, I got all these other sexy choices for the talent I want to get. How do I differentiate? And that's probably the big story, for my lesson was, it wasn't because we were smart, it wasn't because we're like, oh, cultures, eat strategy for breakfast. It was because we were getting crushed in the recruiting space. And we asked a really great question, which was, what assets do we have and why would someone want to work here? Those two questions. What assets do we have that differentiate us from all the choices that people have in Silicon Valley where they can work? And why would someone want to work here? And then we very quickly got to, well, the problem we're solving matters. Helping people find their dream job like that, no one can touch that, right? Like you can go over to Facebook and help kids develop their short attention span capability and help proliferate fake news, or you can come here and help your kids find their dream job. I mean, what do you want to do?
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and this is your podcast for leadership, inspiration, and impact. Today, we have a great guest in Steve Cadigan. Steve is one of the most influential voices in talent strategy and the future of work. As LinkedIn's first Chief Human Resources Officer, he led the company through its first hypergrowth, or its early hypergrowth, scaling the organization from 400 to 4,000 employees in just 3.5 years. It's massive growth. Steve was instrumental in building LinkedIn's world-renowned culture, helping shape it into a talent magnet. Beyond LinkedIn, Steve advises Fortune 500 companies, governments, and startups around the world. He has worked with organizations like Google, BBC, Slack, Intel, and even the city of Lisbon. He is the author of Workquake, and we'll get into that today, a widely regarded book that redefines how leaders and employees should think about careers and organizational success in a post-COVID world. Steve, welcome to the show. I'm excited to get into this conversation.
Having me, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's start here. I mean, you start with your background. What early experiences shaped your career in HR and talent strategy?
I think I was ready for HR before I even knew what HR was, primarily because of my love for sports, not only as an athlete, but as a fan. And I've always loved watching how different people respond to different circumstances. How do they react when they're behind? How do they react when they're ahead? How do they react when they were the star and then they're no longer the star? Or how do they play when they're in foul trouble? And how do they respond to different kinds of coaching? And when I stumbled onto recruiting about 1 year out of college, I was surprised, like, you're going to pay me for this? Like, I can do this, and it's actually a profession that I can help identify talent, put it on a team, map people to the right kind of bosses and environments. And so it was love at first sight. And I feel really lucky. I found that around age 23, 24, early in my journey. And I've been on that track ever since.
That's awesome. And we talked a little bit before the show that you pitched a little in college. Were you a righty or lefty?
A righty, and I was a junk thrower. I had no speed. And funny story, my first game, we were playing a Coast Guard Academy. So it's Division III, nothing fancy. And I gave up a couple of runs. I walked a few batters, and then the scorekeeper called a few hits that I thought were errors. And I got taken out of the game after giving up 3 runs, and there were no outs. And when you calculate an ERA of 3 runs with no outs, your ERA is infinite. So guess what my nickname was for the rest of my baseball career? Infinity. Infinity. Yeah, so it was a short-lived stint as a baseball player. I could really move the ball, but I didn't have speed, which you really need at that level. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's a good experience. I played a little college football as well, and it's the experience that I've taken with that, the relationships, being on the teams, working hard, because high school to college is such a different environment. Because high school was all fun. You're playing with your friends that you grew up with, whether it was if you're playing a team sport, and college, it's work. And you got classes to go to, you got film study, you got weightlifting, you got a whole bunch of additional things. It's work, so it really does prepare you. In fact, your recruiting background, as I was recruiting financial advisors, I specifically looked for college athletes.
Yeah, it's so true, and it really tests your resolve because you have all these friends doing all these other things, and you're going on a bus on the weekends to away games, and you're spending all these hours practicing and training. And if you don't really love it, it's really it's going to show pretty quick, right, at the college level.
Yeah, 100%. So this rapid growth at LinkedIn, you're the first CHRO there, and you have this just explosive growth. What was it like in that time frame to go from 400 to 4,000 in such a quick spurt?
Nothing could have prepared me for that. I got to say, prior to LinkedIn, I was a big company refugee. I mean, we're talking, Fireman's Fund Insurance Company, thousands of people, Cisco Systems. I was there probably from like 15 to 40,000, big companies. And, when you're in a big company, you're largely responsible for tuning and fixing and, maybe changing or modifying what people have laid before you. And when you go to a startup, as was the case at LinkedIn, it was only about 5-6 years old when I joined. Man, there was nothing late. There's nothing to change. Like, you're building. And I never built before. And so I didn't know what to expect. And I think that was an asset because I didn't know what I should do or what I was supposed to do. And I thought I was going to be able to apply all these lessons from my prior experiences. But really, building was an incredibly challenging experience for me. I'll give you an example. The first week at LinkedIn, I was in an executive meeting, and the discussion turned into an argument, turned into a fight almost around, should we do performance reviews? And I'm sitting here looking like, wait a second, you guys are six, you've never figured out if you want to do them. And if you do, should you do them once a year, twice a year? Should you have a rating? If you have a rating, what should the scale be? And if you do have a rating, should you tell the employee or should you not tell the employee? And I'm thinking like, holy cow. And then I sort of pivoted in my head going, wow, this is really cool. We get to decide how to do this. And so it was really hard at first until I realized, wait, this is a privilege and an honor to get to build it. I need to rethink this. And everyone on our leadership team was bringing their mostly bad experiences with talent in other companies relative to performance management, relative to organization design, compensation philosophies, how many levels we should have. And once I started to accept, okay, we're going to get to build this, I started to try to surround myself with people who'd done this before, who'd built. And that was really, really helpful for me. But man, I can't tell you every day, how many things were new to me. And that was scary at first because, I'm used to HR's got to be in control. We got to know the answer. And I'm like, I don't have any answers here. And then when the CEO was like, hey, we're making this stuff up. So, do your best. And that's all we can do. That sort of took the pressure off a little bit. But, to be in a company that is building a recruiting product, okay, and to be struggling recruiting your own people, that was the big challenge that we faced, right? Like our CEO, Jeff Weiner at the time said, Steve, if our customers know that we don't know how to recruit and we're selling a recruiting product, yeah, that's not a good look, okay? So we got to get really good at this. And I'm thinking, well, gee, Jeff, our neighbors are Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter. They can outpay us, outbenefit us, outperk us, outwork environment us, out on-site childcare center us, out bus to San Francisco for the employees, out LeBron James is coming for breakfast today. And I got nothing. So you got to give me something, and that was the forcing function for us to really raise our game and say, well, we can't outpay people. We can't perk and benefit people. What asset do we have? And I think for all the entrepreneurs listening, today, I think that's not an atypical situation. You're looking around going, oh man, I got all these other sexy choices for the talent I want to get. How do I differentiate? And that's probably the big story, for my lesson was, it wasn't because we were smart. It wasn't because we're like, oh, cultures, eat strategy for breakfast. It was because we were getting crushed in the recruiting space. And we asked a really great question, which was, what assets do we have and why would someone want to work here? Those two questions. What assets do we have that differentiate us from all the choices that people have in Silicon Valley where they can work? And why would someone want to work here? And then we very quickly got to, well, the problem we're solving matters. Helping people find their dream job like that. No one can touch that, right? Like you can go over to Facebook and help kids develop their short attention span capability and help proliferate fake news, or you can come here and help your kids find their dream job. I mean, what do you want to do, right? Or you can go to Google and yes, you can double your salary and you can buff the trophies of everyone before you, or you can come here and build something. What do you want to do? And that's how we started to play it. And then we started to, shift the tide. There's a lot more behind that, but that was the big lesson for me.
No, it's such a powerful lesson because you're finding your competitive edge, right? Because everyone could outcompete you. And you're right, every entrepreneur faces this. There's always someone bigger, always someone better. There's always someone that can pay more. So it's, what is your vision for the future? What's your core focus? And what's your competitive edge that helps? Because the right people will find you once those are clear, and the wrong ones won't, or they'll be repelled away, if you will.
And that's how you win the war for talent, is you get out of the war for talent and make yourself an attractive destination. And that's the stories that your people tell, the stories even of the people that left, saying, well, I left, but that was a great journey for me, a great learning experience. Interestingly enough, starting this conversation around sports, I find that what top tier college programs are going through in basketball and football is absolutely fascinating. Think about all these college coaches that now have to recruit from every university. You just have to recruit from high school before. Now you got to recruit from every university. We've got entire basketball rosters leaving, in part for graduation, but the rest entering the portal because they can. And you've got now salary negotiations. You saw what happened to the quarterback at Tennessee saying, $4 million is not enough. And all these other colleges like, oh yeah, money hungry. And then UCLA is like, we'll take you, we'll pay you. Yeah. And, I guess it wasn't that bad. And so it's forcing a completely different challenge to build a new talent strategy in a marketplace where your talent has a lot more leverage. Now that's not new if you've recruited in Silicon Valley. Like the software engineer is the 5-star athlete, they are the ones. And we've been, in back alleys with knives in our teeth, fighting for these people for years. And to see the colleges struggle, like, what are you complaining about? Like, this is time for you to raise your game. All that, loyalty and you got to be here for 4 years, that doesn't work anymore. You got to have something else, right? And you saw when Calipari went to Arkansas, well, who's writing the NIL checks at Arkansas? Walmart. That's who, that's a nice bankroll to have. And so he's like, I'm going where the money is. And then you see some of these other coaches say, I'm out. Nick Saban. I am such a fan of what he's done for college football. Nick's like, I'm spending my time talking about how much money I'm going to pay my kids, not how I can make you into a man. That's not a conversation that interests me. I'm going to go get my nut over in the, broadcast booth. Thank you very much. It's just fascinating. And the world of work is filled with all these new challenges. People want to work in their pajamas instead of go to an office, and people, changing jobs faster than any time in history. And, I tell them, look to college sports. Like they're figuring it out, they're figuring out. I know my best people are only going to be here a year. I know it. And so I got to build a team really fast. I got to teach a simple offense and a simple defense. And that's where in business, the resistors are like, no. What, I want to build a company with people staying 5 to 10 years. And I'm saying, but they're not going to stay 5 or 10 years. All the data shows they're not. And it's not because you're not nice. It's because they can see so many more choices now, and they're going to pursue that. And as a parent, I love the fact that my kids have all these new choices. As an employer, it terrifies me, that I've got, I've really got to be a place not only to attract people, but ideally keep the best ones, right? And it's way different than it used to be.
Yeah, I actually just brought something up that I just had an NIL expert on the show. We haven't released the episode yet, but it was a fascinating conversation, and that might actually come out next week. But just learning this, if I was an AD or a college coach right now, I would go spend some time in Silicon Valley and learn from the businesses that have actually had to go through this and compete at the highest level, because you can parlay that into it. He was mentioning, it was interesting, because it's not just about money. He was talking about the culture a lot, because I asked him, I was like, why not just get a bunch of business people in the athletic department that know how to recruit and know how to raise capital? And he's like, there needs to be some of that. However, there's these deeply established cultures in these universities that also have to be merged, because right now you just have these administrative people that are getting bumped up and trying to figure this out, and they have no business, no recruiting experience, any of that stuff. So there has to be this like convergence of those two things for the universities that are figuring it out at a high level.
I mean, I talked to some of my friends about the recruiting challenges that we're watching, and it's funny we're having this conversation because I'm actually building a pitch to Division I coaches and athletic directors, and right here in my backyard, Stanford, they hired a general manager, and that's a role that we're seeing other universities do. A GM, Andrew Luck, he's the GM. There's never been a role like that in universities. So what are you responsible for? Managing the whole new dynamic, which is a really smart first step. But one of the questions I have about the NIL is like, why aren't they negotiating multi-year? It seems to be just a one-year thing. Like, hey, if you really want continuity, especially for a quarterback, like understanding the offense takes time. And I would say, hey, we're going to give you this year, but next year we're going to do that. And that means you have to be more proactive with your donors, obviously, so that you've got guaranteed money coming in. But that's how I would look for multipliers, and I would try to tie it to getting the best for that person, not because the schools are trying to get the best for them, not necessarily the best for the athlete. And you're going to have a win-win there. And I don't see that yet. They're just looking for right now, solve this year. And I think that's a miss,
Yeah, I agree. Hey, going back to LinkedIn for a minute, what was the biggest challenge you saw in your time frame there? And how did you overcome?
I think that the biggest challenge, to expand on what I said before, was determining what our identity was. Why would someone want to work here? And, what assets do we have? And then really, how do we preserve that when we're doubling in size 3 years in a row? We doubled 500, 1,000, 1,000 to 2 to 4. And how do you not implode under the weight of your own success and growth? I mean, don't get me wrong. These are great problems to have, but we were terrified. And I think the fact that we were so obsessed with our talent strategy allowed that moment of hypergrowth not to get too unwieldy, or not to have too much collateral damage, if you will. So what we did was, and I'm not going to take credit for this, but I was part of the team that made this, is that every meeting we held, every company meeting, every town hall, every business meeting started with all the goals that we're achieving to build a world-class team. Not how's the tech plan, how's the sales strategy, how's the engineering roadmap. It's, are we building a world-class team? Are we bringing in the right leaders? Are the leaders performing? Are we setting them up to succeed? And are we, developing our staff? And are we still bringing in great people? Because when you hire that fast, it's hard to keep the quality bar consistent, because someone who just got here yesterday is now hiring under them, and they don't know what you're about yet. Right. So that was really, I think once we started succeeding in the recruiting challenge, it then became accelerating the onboarding, and getting time to productivity sorted. So it's like, you can't rest in that kind of growth. You can't go, oh yeah, kick your feet. Woo, we just crushed 500 hires this year. It's like, now we got a new problem. The day we went public, okay, which should have been a day of like, let's go get, drunk in Wall Street and have a great time. And we far exceeded what our analysts told us we would get. They said, you're going to go out around $40. We closed the first day around 95, 100. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what that success did was drove all kinds of uncertainty of every candidate we were hiring, because the stock was volatile. And the way we were using stock options was you get priced on your first day. So everyone thought they were going to get priced overly high. And so they were holding on to their offers like, no, I don't want to do this. So I had to completely change our comp strategy. Instead of getting drunk on Wall Street that night with all my colleagues, I was on the phone with our board and our comp committee going, okay, we're going to need to move from stock options to restricted shares, which is basically whatever the market price is, that's what you're going to get. And you're not going to have an option to buy. You're going to get the shares, right? That's a restricted share unit. And that was exhausting, and it's probably that's why those 4 years I was there felt like 20, and that having the stamina to do that is hard, bro. It's really hard.
Yeah, that's where all your gray hairs came in, right?
I'm just happy I had.
That's right. So thinking about it, by the way, my firm was in the financial world, so I built a financial advisory firm. So I remember your guys' IPO quite well. But thinking about your doubling in size, a lot of entrepreneurs are poised for growth. I'm working with several of them right now. They're poised for this rapid growth. And one of the things that they struggle with is, they may be able to hire and bring the talent in, but then it's developing that talent. So I'm just curious, as like you guys bringing in, going from 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000, 2,000 to 4,000. What was the strategy in developing these people? And maybe give some insight that could help some entrepreneurs here as they think about developing their people.
Be a great mistake that we made, and great, not as I'm excited to share it with you, but with a lot of remorse and sadness, because it really caused some damage in some careers. So when you're poising yourself for growth, so let's just say, I'll go maybe a little bit further down the journey than some people may be at. Like we started Sniff, we're going to be $1 billion business. Like we are going to be, $1 billion. We looked around the table. Hey, any of you guys run $1 billion? No, none of us had. Okay, so maybe we need to go get some adults to give us some adult supervision here and help us. Sure, the board could help us, but the board had never seen the hyper growth that we were going through either, right? So they said, you go hire some people who, led $1 billion businesses, and they can help us start thinking about how to architect this. So we hired 2 people. One, I think, was in marketing, and the other was in product. And within about 4 weeks, they just completely imploded. And we're like, what's going on? Well, the first thing they asked for, what most of them was, hey, I need 6 administrative assistants. We're like, what are you talking about? Like, we're a startup. We share, like 4 executives share one, like 6 admins? No. And then we very quickly realized we hired people who led $1 billion businesses. They hadn't built a $1 billion business. Big difference. Hire builders, hire people that thrive in taking chaos to order, who've done it before. And sometimes you're going to get fortunate and find someone who's never done it before and they have the right chops, okay? But someone's got to like working in crazy. If they need order and 6 admins and all this sort of bloated architecture and infrastructure to run, you're in trouble, right? Because they're going to freak out. And these guys freaked out. And so all of a sudden, okay, our bad. We need to really rethink that. So that was a big lesson for us. The other thing is, I would say, maybe somewhere around 25%, probably, plus or minus, leaders are not going to scale when their team goes from 5 to 100. They're just not. They're not going to like it. They're not going to want it. They're going to be out of their depth. And so you got to very frequently pulse your leaders and pulse your teams on how's it going. How's the performance of the team? And we had an annual employee survey that we quickly turned into a every 6 month survey. And there's one question that we asked that really surfaced leadership challenges and struggles. And that was employee net promoter score, ENPS. Would you recommend this company? It means you're having such a great experience. Of course, you're going to bring your friends in. And 95% of the time, when we had a team score significantly below the company mean, we had a leadership challenge, right? Like something's missing here. And, not all of us are made to scale like that. And that's fine. That's not a criticism. Some of us operate better in different environments. So, but you got to be laser focused on that as you're growing, because not everyone's suited, capable, ready, wanting to be on that growth ride, And so then you got to decide. And some of these are founders that I'm talking about, right? Some of these are co-founders, very, very sensitive because it's their baby that you're playing with. And you have to be, have gravitas and respect, but also appreciate like, hey, you're kind of getting in the way here and putting us in a difficult spot. Like, what would you recommend that we do? Like, do you want to come in and work every day, or because you're only showing up like half the time now that things are going really well? So we need people who are really engaged in here. So what do you recommend? So we had to have a lot of those hard conversations, but you really got to, and to me, that's where the most important effort goes as a senior leader is, do I have the right leaders and are they scaling,
Yeah. It's so hard to bring in some people that have had great success and bring them kind of back to earth. Is like, no, we're grinding it out again. I know you already went through that. Are you sure you want to go through that again? Because we need that type of energy to be able to grind it out. If you think that you're going to come in and just bark from the top, that's not the energy that we need right now to build this thing.
Right. And, the other thing that we did was we really fought hard to preserve a very flat org structure. And it's funny, the random things that happen that blow up your well-intended plans. So we, CEO, VP, director, manager, employee. We tried to keep that as long as we could, 5 levels. And we would go and recruit out of Yahoo back in the day. Any listeners here around, back in the late, sort of like 2008, 7, 8, 9, Yahoo was sort of slowly fading and had been the star in the late 90s. And so they had, CEO, EVP, SVP, VP, AVP, senior director, junior director in training, senior manager, associate manager, tech lead, and you. And we would say, which architecture do you want to operate in? And we really believed, and I think it helped us, that flatness enhanced communication, enhanced understanding, enhanced our capacity to prioritize what was important. And so we try to preserve that. And then one day, one of our best guys in product went to alumni day at his university. And all his friends, he was a director, and all his friends are VPs. And he's like, hey, I need to be a VP. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I just went, and it was embarrassing. I'm smarter than all these people at MIT, and they're all VPs now, and my wife is embarrassed, and I'm embarrassed, so I need to be a VP. And we're like, hey, what you do initially say, hey, well, we pay you like a VP, like, what are you talking about? You're already getting that kind of money. And then the second thing, if that doesn't work, then it's like, well, how could you be so shallow that you care about title? This is like, we're on a mission here. Yeah. He's like, nope, still want to be a VP. And so we faced the challenge, like, are we going to sort of, create a new role? So we wound up settling on senior director. So there we were. Now we got a new level that we never had before, right? To try to appease him and then give him a plan of what he needed to do to get to be VP. So that's one thing that, try to preserve your flatness. And that's hard because when you're hiring, you don't have a lot of assets because you can't outpay. So I can give you whatever title you want. What does it matter to me? Well, it matters when you get big, because now you got a goat rodeo of different titles that you're going to have to smooth out. So you're going to, if you give away the store early, you're in trouble. Second thing, and this is really, really important for cultural, sort of continuity and craziness, is investing in building trust. When you are growing that fast, stuff is breaking, glasses are falling on the floor. People are, finding glass in their food, it's hard. So how do you survive employees going, what is going on? Does anyone running the show? Is you build trust. And the way you build trust is you have a lot of proximity between your senior leadership team and the rest of the company. If there's an ivory tower, everyone's on the road and people don't trust what's going on. So we try to do a lot of surveys, did a lot of communications. Whenever there was a hot issue that people were pissed off about, we'd have a town hall and say, okay, let's talk about it. What can we do? And we got to make some hard decisions. And but we want to collaborate with you on that. And I think employees really respected that. And I'll give you a great example. We had a group of people, and we're probably 45-minute on a good day and an hour and a half on a bad day commute to San Francisco. We're south of San Francisco. And where does all the young talent live? San Francisco, because that's where the action is. Silicon Valley is like for the deadbeats like me that have kids and want to have a little bit more of a country experience for our kids. So they were very vocal and said, all these companies down here have buses bringing people. How come we don't have a bus? We need a bus. And so I saw the feedback, like, okay, this is now a big problem. So we gathered everyone together and we said, okay, we're going to look into it. So I look into it, do the research, and find out that for 2 buses in the morning, 2 buses in the evening is going to cost us $250,000. Okay. And I did a zip code check and found out that there's about 20% of our employees living in San Francisco. And then we've got about 40% living further than San Francisco in other places. So I showed them the data. I gathered everyone together and said, here's the data. This is how much it costs. And by the way, you're a minority of people who are traveling. Do you think it's fair that we give you that money and not, support all these other people? And they said, no, that's probably not a good decision. Thank you for doing the research. We still want the bus, but we really respect the and the research behind it. So, that's listening and building loyalty even when you have to say no, but that trust strategy is the only way you're going to survive the inevitable, disagreements and challenges that you're going to face when things go sideways as you're growing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up trust as a part of that, because communication is a big part of trust. And you talked about the town hall. As you're growing that fast and that big, communication becomes very difficult. There's so many different lines. How else beyond the town halls did you guys feel like you did really well in communication, or maybe even some slip-ups?
So one of the things, and we had a CEO who just, he wanted the Steve Jobs playbook. Like whatever Steve did, I want to do that too. And this was right around the time when Steve passed away, but a little bit before. And one of the things we heard that Apple did was they had in-person, company meetings. It wasn't like a broadcast over video or things like that. And at this time, we're so big, we can't fit everyone into a conference room, even in our headquarters. We could probably fit about 300, but we said, listen, we are not going to send email announcements around new hires, competitive play or some sort of investment that we're making, new market opportunities. We're going to always deliver that in person. And we would like that you to attend that. And if you're in a remote field office in another time zone, we would strongly recommend that you watch that whole video together as a team and replay it the next business day. And then we'd always reserve time for questions. So we did real-time communications. We, strongly avoided the long emails. Here's the update on blah, blah, blah. And then if it's the end of the quarter, we would do this every other week. So bi-weekly. Okay. And the CEO would lead it. And if he's out of town, the CFO or myself would chair it. And we would cover the business priorities. We would cover, challenges. And then we'd always leave around 20 minutes for questions. And we measured ourselves by how hard the questions were. If there were a bunch of softballs, we're not creating the right environment. Like we want, and we would, if there was a little bit of hesitation, when you get bigger, people, feel like I don't want to be the one asking the hard question. So we would plant some really hard questions that we knew were top of mind for people. So that was probably the biggest thing. Avoid the big emails, because what happens when you get a big email is you park it to get to later, and later never comes. And we try to keep it in person. We try to make those meetings like entertaining, make it like worth your time, right? And so, with engineers, you want to have it be at the crack of 11 a.m., because they're not going to be there at 9. So, you had to, and we were unapologetically a West Coast California company. Like, hey, if you're in Dubai or Bangalore, like, sorry, we're not going to this week accommodate you guys. Like, that's who we are. That's where the majority of our people are, but we're going to record it and send it to you. And, and then when we got really big, we would start having those meetings in those locations. Yeah.
Really good. Glad you touched on that. That's an area that a lot of leaders struggle because they're so busy in the doing and getting everything going, whether they're leading a company of 20 or 300 or 4,000 at that time. It's one of those things where it's hard to get people together and get them away from the doing and actually work on the business instead of in the business. So let's transition to Workquake. What inspired you to write Workquake?
Very simply, over probably the 5-10 years before I wrote it, just a raised awareness of how poor the relationship between employees and employers was evolving. That both parties were increasingly unsatisfied. Like companies saying people just aren't staying, they're disloyal, they're shopping for promotions, this isn't right, and then employees feeling like, hey, I'm not getting good growth opportunities. I'm just a cog in a wheel. And so I felt that we needed a reframe, and and that's why I wrote the first half of the book is for employees and the second half is for employers. I'm like, hey, both parties here are going to need to work together to forge a future that they both feel excited about. And it's really meant to start a conversation, not to answer all the challenges or highlight all the problems. But it was that really just growing discomfort, talking to both employees and employers for years, going, wow, this is really not trending well,
Oh, that's great. And what did you notice during COVID that made this such a really meaningful read? Because I have I'll get into my own, but I want to hear what you noticed during COVID and how things shifted.
What's about COVID, and even since COVID, is that really valuable conversations are now taking place. Like, why do we need to be in office? Learnings around, wow, in virtual meetings, that person that always dominates when we're in a conference room can't dominate because no one can hear them if other people are talking at the same. They can't be overbearing on the meeting. And all of us started to see our circumstances from a different perspective, and I think that's really, really healthy. People that were having long commutes and were commuting were starting to see things that they were missing at home, or they're saying, "Wow, I really missed that meditation time that I had in my commute. I didn't really appreciate how important that was to me at the beginning of the day to sort of get my thoughts together on the drive and to put everything, together for the next day when I drove home." So it's a really good moment. And the biologists say, when any biological creature is put in a new environment for an extended period, they will it's almost impossible for them to revert to the same behavior they had before that extended change. And that was a moment for a lot of leaders. So I think it's super healthy for those conversations to be happening, and for companies to say get back into the office because is just such the wrong approach. Like you want people together. Be honest and say, I'm worried about the teamwork. I'm worried about the culture dilution. I'm worried about the informal conversations where amazing moments of invention and creativity happen in unstructured moments. Like we're not, anything online is structured, it's scheduled, and we're not bringing the same line. So I appreciate where leaders are concerned about losing that, but I also appreciate people saying, hey, my life is more productive when I'm at home more. Like isn't that why I work? To have a more productive life? And now that I've tasted it, I can't forget that, like I can get an appointment to get my hair done now on Tuesday. I couldn't before. Or I love being home when my kids come home from school. I didn't know what I was missing. That's a magical moment. And I would come home later and I'd be tired. They'd be tired. And I was missing the best of them and they were missing the best of me, And so I think some of those moments are pretty cool, but I'd love to hear sort of your take on it.
So I was running a financial firm at the time. I had 115 advisors. And in our world, prior to COVID, even though Skype and Zoom and stuff had existed for, probably a decade, ours was largely a face-to-face business. It was across the table, across the desk, at the kitchen table, conversations that we're having about money and life. And we were really fearful as soon as everything got shut down in April, 5 years ago, that business was going to be harmed, relationships with the clients. It was odd. Like 95% of our business was done face to face. And that all in immediate, just instant goes away. So we were real fearful. What ended up happening was it gave us permission to do business like you and I are speaking today via Zoom. And it made it normalized it. Instead of being abnormal, it became normal. And there's pros and cons to that where, I found leading a firm of 250 people that from 8 to 5, I'm on Zooms with my 4 kids thundering above my head at my home office, sounding like elephants. And then from 5 to 8 p.m., I'm playing part-time psychologist for those that are locked down. So there was definitely challenges with it. And for me being ADD and liking to be around my people, that was hard as well. But it did normalize business being done via Zoom instead of having, which made it convenient for those that, and it kind of opened up where we had more of a local client base to now a national client base, where we could get referrals across the country, and this was normal to do business like you and I are speaking today. So there was some great pros and some real big cons as well that happened with it. And I think now now that I'm in the coaching space, a lot of people are struggling with getting people back to work, getting them back in the office, and they are having those conversations that you're mentioning. And it's kind of a give and take that employers and employees got to really grasp onto to make it the best of both worlds for everyone involved.
I agree. And there's a company here, Dropbox, where the CEO is like, hey, customers used to be really frustrated if I didn't go visit them. And now I can't. And I could see 5 times as many customers in a day than I could before. That's phenomenal, and that was a win, that I can touch more and not feel, have the customer experience be perceived as poor just because I'm not physically there,
Yeah.
And he said, we had a couple of people on our leadership team that were never in the room, and they always felt, like the stepchild on the leadership team, and now everyone's in the same capacity. They feel like they've got an equal footing at the table, which is pretty cool, And but
Yeah.
we weren't built for this moment. We weren't, and that's why I'm trying to tell all these people that say, why does my company let me do more remote? It's like, because no leadership class was built for how to lead remote teams, and and so give them some time, and show them the merits, and try to help them if that's really important to you. I ask all my executive recruiter friends, what's the first question you're hearing from candidates? Can I do this remotely? And that's so I think if you want great talent, you're going to have a bigger pool if you can offer that, but you got to really believe it. You got to really believe that I can grow my business and meet better results. And it's interesting. I talked to a lot of business leaders during the pandemic, and I'm like, "How's it going?" They go, "Oh my God, it's horrible. People distracted. I've had higher turnover. We got all kinds of issues." I'm like, "Well, how are the profits?" "Oh yeah, we're having best years ever." I said, "So when I asked you that question, how's it going? Why did you lead with all the other stuff, but the end result is good?" And it's because we don't have a lot of models that teach us everything that's happening is good. It's all that stuff about high turnover is bad, and all this newness that we have in terms of supply chain constraints, that we had to face like we've never faced before. And why didn't why didn't you say, wow, we've really learned to be agile and solve problems in different ways and be more creative? You didn't say that. You said it's a nightmare, and then you said, yeah, we've had the best years ever. Like, I
Yeah.
said, listen to what you're saying. Maybe there's a lesson there, right?
There's definitely a lesson there. I'd love to get your take on this. I want to toss something out there. So what I've noticed is with this is if you're an employee that wants remote work, you better be really good. And if you're an employer that is going to get a remote team, you also be a really good leader. You have to be a really good leader, because I coach a team that is spread out throughout the country. Leadership team. One of the owners is in Indiana, the other in North Carolina or South Carolina. They got team members in Florida, South Dakota, Indiana, and that might cover the gamut. So anyhow, I was on a meeting call with them yesterday for 8 hours, and they're a phenomenal team. All the leaders and the owners, just great. But there's struggles with that. If you're not willing to lead, and if you're not willing to put in the effort from home on the converse side as an employee, then those relationships are going to constantly get strained, and people are going to have that tug and pull that really causes some constraints and some bad feelings. But what are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, and here's there's pros and cons, right? When I look at the situation we're in now, given the situation you described, I feel like we're making the sausage still. We don't have all those benchmarks of how to do this yet, okay? And we will in 5 years. We'll have a lot. And everyone, by the way, came to the table with a different dynamic. Some people were more remote going into COVID. Some people were all together. Some people have hired a lot of people during COVID who are remote that they didn't have before. So everyone's coming to the table with a different dynamic and a different architecture, challenging, the success or the failure based on different attributes. My belief is based on the companies that I see doing well is good leaders, yes, but also regular periodic in-person gatherings that are really, really important. I'm on a board of a company in Canada that set out to be, and this was the CEO's quote, we're going to be the best company to work for remotely in Canada and then the world. And then my question was, what does that look like? How do you know? How are you going to know? I had no answer. Okay. This is 2-3 years ago. Today, guess what he's doing? Okay, we're going to need centers of excellence. Operational performance hasn't been met. And it's because, course correction takes longer when you're remote than we're used to and we're comfortable with. And when you're an entrepreneur, you do not have time to waste, and so when we're together, people tend to ask the harder questions. They have those informal moments. And so the teams that I see navigating this better are ones with good leaders and regular, quarterly or more in-person gatherings where we really brainstorm and we get together and we have relationship building, architected into the get-togethers.
Yeah, that's really good. And by the way, that team that I was with yesterday, that's what they do. They're getting quarterly get-togethers. They're getting in person at least twice a year and getting the whole team together, even though they're spread throughout the country. So thinking about that, though, as well, just like I was talking about with our client pool getting opened up from local to national, and you were talking about the talent pool in San Francisco being just a little bit of distance away from you. If you're thinking about remote work, the talent pool has become more national. So what are the best companies that are doing this remote work? How are they going about recruiting and developing those leaders nationally to really thrive in this post-COVID world?
You could go to ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, ask that question, and you're not going to get a very long list right now. I mean, this is what I was saying earlier. The sausage is getting made right now, and I work with organizations that have labs. We need people in the lab all the time. We can't have people at home. There's safe environments for some of the testing that we're doing and so forth. So I think we have to, and this is the thing that's hard for a lot of organizations. We have to experiment, and try out and see what's working and iterate quickly and learn and share lessons learned. And some people and some teams are really made for this hybrid infrastructure. Any company that I see that's gone hybrid, like 3 or 4 days, it's always people home Monday and Friday, and in the office usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? And so, what I'm trying to help people understand is, like, for most businesses where you have knowledge workers, it's about organization performance. Is the organization performing? Not do you see them performing? Is the organization performing? That's the ultimate measure. Don't get too wrapped around, they're not logged into their VPN today. Are they really doing something? There's just so much increasing research around creativity and innovation happens with people who have better sleep patterns, who have more time to think rather than just sit and crank and ride the bicycle all day long. So I had a really interesting experience a few weeks ago. I was in Portugal with the top investors and the top startups in brain wellness. Okay. And I asked them, it was the end of the day. I was a little bit cranky, so I got a little provocative. And I said, hey, let me ask you a question. What does all the research say is the optimal number of days that we should be working as human beings? And they all said, yeah, about 3 days a week, And I said, how many of you work 3 days a week? 0. I go, so what's all this about? If you're you investors are investing in these people that are giving you the data, you're not doing it. So what's the point? And that just led to a good hour-long debate and discussion. We're seeing lots of really interesting things, like, will AI deliver the 3-hour or 3-day, 4-day work week? Will it? And I got a lot of friends that say 100% it will. And I'm like, I don't know, because if I'm an investor and I see you can do your job in 3 or 4 days, well, I'm going to get more stuff done. I want to get my return, right? So I don't know if it's going to happen, right? Because our society's built for working 5 days. So interesting.
Yep. So we have also seen offices or office spaces, companies trying to make it cool to be at work, whether it's ping pong tables, beer on tap, whatever they may be doing to try and get people back into the office. Is that working?
It's not working. What the research has already showed us before this, people want to win. That's what they want more than anything. Does that stuff hurt you? It doesn't hurt you, But having been responsible for facilities in a couple of organizations that I've been a part of, it's impossible to build a work environment that works for everyone. It's just like you're never going to satisfy everyone. Too loud, too noisy. I want a bigger cube, want an office, want windows. The air is too cold. Everyone's got a different need. So I think the best pathway through this is, like, you got to experiment. You got to try different things. But I don't think that's the answer.
Yeah. It is cool to visit them. I mean, I've visited a lot of companies, and yeah, that's a cool addition. But it's also an expense if it's not actually working. That's one of those things that, like, why do it if there's no proof in the pudding?
A conference hosted by a financial services company that I won't name because they were generous to host it. It was in Dallas. It was gorgeous. And as I'm walking in, I'm just going, I don't want, if I were here, I'd want that money that's going to all this in my bonus check. I don't want all this stuff. I don't want all this stuff, I want good enough. I don't want fancy. I don't want a place where like, hey, we've got tours for all of you after the session that we're having, and you can go see our eco farm that's in the back. It's like, I'm not interested in that. Like you got too much money is what I'm thinking, when I say, and that's just me, that's just me. Yeah.
No, it's not just you, because I led a firm in the financial world, and there was degrees like, could I afford a $400,000 car? Yep. Would I look like an asshole driving it and have perception like you just had of I'm making too much money? Yeah. So there was a limit that I placed on myself on how nice of a car I felt I could drive and not seem pretentious and not seem like we were making too much money for on top of what we're supposed to be making our clients.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, when we filed to go public, there was a I forget what the name of it is. You could do pre-public share selling, second market shares or something like that. You're probably familiar with this. So some of our employees before we went
Yep.
public sold shares before it was in the open market because they could. People would give them, and then one guy shows up with a Maserati. I'll never forget. The CEO comes to my office and goes, "Whose Maserati is that in the parking lot?" I go, "Uh-oh." He was pissed. And then someone from the San Jose Mercury News got a hold of it and took a photo. That employee, who, by the way, is a fabulous guy, had a real passion for cars. Like, this isn't like I'm just going to go beat my chest. And he had realized a dream of his that he could afford to do that. And he hadn't told anyone that he sold his shares. And so he got a hand slapped a little bit. And he very quickly parked it in the Google parking lot from then forward, because you can park there and walk to our campus. But it was a bad look, Yeah.
Yeah. So we got someone here that has a deep level of HR experience, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs that don't have an HR team, right? They just, they got to figure their owners or their CFO is playing the HR role or seat as well. What are some best practices for some of those entrepreneurs that don't have the capacity that LinkedIn has or had when you were there, where they're just trying to figure things out and do the right things to make sure that they, don't get themselves in trouble, but also recruit and retain the best talent?
I mean, the best work I ever did was not because I was smart or I had a good HR team. It was because the leaders jointly owned the talent strategy. And I really want to encourage all leaders here, like, hey, it's really important that you own the culture, that you own the compensation philosophy, that you as a leader, and your leadership team are really sharing in building the organization. Never, delegate that. You don't want someone who's responsible for the culture not to be you as a leader. That's a big mistake. Think about it. Like, LinkedIn was 6 years old, 400 people, and they hired me as the first head of HR. They had contractors helping them out, and they had a bunch of contract recruiters helping them out before I walked in the door. So they got pretty far down the road, and it wasn't. I mean, we weren't breaking too many laws, I should say, when I walked in the door relative to compliance. But there's compliance part of HR, and then there's the constructive coaching. And I'll just tell you that most of my time when I walked in the door, I did put down, lay some of the rails from a process and practice perspective, but it's more coaching the leaders on how to be better, and hey, you got a couple of employees that are just think you're just talking over them, or you're not including them, and you're going to lose a lot of people, or you keep promoting the guys who have less experience than the women on your team. Like, that's not going to play well for us. Are you aware of that? And is that the company that you want to be a part of? Or and this is a story I've seen play out in every company I've been in. The manager runs in and says, we need to fire, Joe. Okay. Why do you need to fire Joe? Because they're horrible. Everyone hates them and they never do their stuff. Okay. Does Joe know they're horrible? Oh yeah. Have you told Joe they're horrible? Well, no, but they know. Like, so you want to fire Joe and you've never told him he's so bad that he's, going to be subject to termination. No, I said, okay, so what you want to do is a drive-by termination. I said, would you be okay if I fired you like that I just fired you because I know you're bad and never told you? He goes, no, I wouldn't. I said, okay, so what are you going to do? I'm going to go tell Joe that he's performing. So that's right. And that's the culture that we want to build. Do you want to build that culture? Yes, you do. Okay. And that's, when you get, complex enough, and usually somewhere around 250 to 500 people, that's probably when you want some help. but you don't need someone full time. And there's a lot of venture partners that have, HR folks on staff that can help out. But that's just sort of my quick, thought on that topic.
No, I actually love it because I've long thought that HR was misappropriately titled. It's really human leadership, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're leading people and getting them to assimilate to the culture that we're trying to build. And if they don't want to, or they can't, then they got to find a place that fits them better. And we got to get people to, of course, comply with law, but also comply with the culture. And if they're a fit, they're going to thrive. And if they're not, there's someplace else that will be a better fit for them.
And I look at it like this. If I'm doing my job, you don't need me, right? I want to make you better. I don't want to make you depend on me, right? And there's unfortunately, there's a bunch of HR people, that's why I almost didn't go into this field, that are building dependencies on themselves. And if you get the wrong HR person in there, they control salary approvals, promotion approvals, hiring decisions. There's a lot that's going in to shape your culture. And so, I spend a lot of time helping leaders who are hiring their first HR person, saying this is what good looks like and this is what bad looks like. And so if any of you, want some help on that, I put a whole document together on that one. It's one that if you get wrong, it's going to set you back, and invisibly at first. You won't notice it at first. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So obviously on the recruiting side, that's a part of HR, human leadership. And this may be a hard question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you had one tip for recruiting in 2025 or recruiting for the future for entrepreneurs out there, what would that tip be?
Promise them job security, promise them career security, which means however long you're here, I'm going to make you better. I'm going to give you challenging assignments. I'm going to give you stretch opportunities. I'm going to expose you to people and projects and challenges that are going to just make you better. And at the end of the day, you're going to be equipped for whatever is next for you, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else. Play, and it's a whole chapter in my book, play the long game, and that's how we started our interviews at LinkedIn. What do you want to do when you leave here? And they're like, what? You're doing my exit interview? Well, I haven't even got the job offer yet. Like, come on, it's Silicon Valley. We know you're not going to be here for 10 years. So when you leave, I want to make sure while you're here, I'm helping you get where you want to go. And I think that completely, and that's why I wrote my book, because so many employment relationships start under both parties basically building on a false foundation. I'm going to agree to stay here a long time. You're going to agree to employ me a long time. We both know we probably won't follow through on that, but let's start our relationship on a false understanding. Let's blow through that and say, hey, let's be real. You're going to go somewhere else. I want you to go somewhere else. And I want this to be the best place you've ever worked, right? That's how I would say I would frame it, because it just frees you up to sort of say, okay, now we're having a real conversation. Let's go, right?
Yeah. Well, there's so many pieces of that was awesome. Now, leaders, if you're going to make that promise, you better fulfill it.
That's right.
Because they will leave real quick if they start seeing you not fulfill that promise. If you're going to commit to making them better and challenging them and getting them to think bigger, you got to fulfill that promise. But the other piece of that is the dichotomy of it, or the paradox, because there will be some people that will be loyal to you forever because you had that posture.
And that's what you want, is you want to recruit an angel in your universe forever, not just someone to deliver operationally for you today, right? And this is where I find, if I ask any business leader, what's your biggest challenge? They go, how much time do you have? And I said, okay, higher turnover and the need for new skills faster than ever before. Okay. We know we're going to need new people with newer skills faster than ever before. So you have to be developing people. My belief, and this is a little bit crazy, in the next 5 years, we're going to hire people more based on what they can learn than what they know. Because I know the job's going to change. And that sort of freaks people out. And I say, well, the problem we have today is most business models, when I put a plan together, it's that you're going to deliver 95% of the time. Okay. But if I need new skills, this business is not going to work if I have to keep trading you out every 2 years. I'm going to have to invest in you more, the employee, than any time in history. So we need business models that account for someone is not going to be producing widgets 95% of the time. We're going to have to give them, and by the way, You ask any leader, what was the pivotal moment in your career? They will say, when someone put me in that role that I didn't think I was qualified for, I had no experience doing, and I blew it out of the park, and my confidence grew, and my excitement and my energy built. But we designed to not let that happen. We designed to keep people doing the same thing because we want to have confidence it'll get done right. And there's good merit behind that. But if you believe people are going to need new skills, businesses are going to need to become business schools. We're just not going to recruit our way out of this problem. You know, universities, I go to them and say, how's it going? They go, well, business leaders don't know what they want. So they're telling us that we're not delivering what they need, but they can't tell us what they want. I'm like, okay. So, and I see the businesses and universities that are really thriving right now are building sort of ecosystems where the managers are teaching classes, students are solving problems for the company, and internships are getting more and more frequent. That's got to be the way forward. And again, it's the people like, yeah, philosophically, I agree with you, Steve. I'm not ready to make that change. I'm like, okay, I know it's going to happen. So if you're ready, you're going to have a competitive advantage.
Yeah. In fact, are you tracking your retention ratio? Most companies are not. I work with a company right now. I'm certified in EOS, and I'm helping them implement. And they know one of their data measurements is retention, and they're at 73%. And so through this implementation, really structuring core values through getting the vision set and getting everyone bought in to that vision to row in the same direction, they're going to see if they can move the needle on that 73%. My metric, because I knew the financial advisory industry, so over 5 years, the financial advisors that make it in the industry is less than 7%. Mine was 25%. I was trying to get it to 33%. And we're working on culture. We were working on our training and develop at startup. Like, we were working on specific measurements to move that needle because it is costly to continue to bring people in and just continue to train and develop from the ground up. So if you're not tracking that measurement and trying to move the needle on retention through culture, that might be a place to start.
I've got a real complex relationship with this whole notion of retention. I was talking to a guy in Portugal a few months ago. I do a lot of work over there, and he said he's from NTT Docomo, and he said, "Listen, we talk about retaining the relationship, not retaining the employee." And that's management consulting. Right? Your management consulting is come here 3, 4, 5 years, and then go get a better job, and then I can recruit new grads because I could show that I made you better, and that's retaining the relationship. Now, in that industry, it makes sense. Listen, if I'm talking about a hospital and a surgical team, I want people to stay because lives are on the line. And I need people having second language. But you talk to any hospital system, their nurse turnover and doctor turnover is higher than it's ever been. So I'm trying to tell them, plan for that. You know it's going to happen. So what can you do? Instead of a 5-person surgical team, let's get a 15-person surgical team. And let's start having a bigger team so that when someone leaves, we still got bench and we still got backup. But they're not ready for that kind of thinking. Or I've got a hospital saying travel nursing is killing us because nurses know if I go two towns over, I can make 3x, 4x the money because they're struggling and they have to have a nurse. So I'm going to go do that. So I say to hospitals, well, why don't you go loan your nurses? Why do they have to leave you to get 4x? Then you get a little piece off of the placing them as a temporary agency. It's easier to run than a healthcare system. They're like, yeah, don't want to do that, And here, last point on this retention thing, I studied the automobile industry, right? The most valuable company in the automobile industry has the lowest retention, is less than 25 years old, and Tesla is worth more than Ford, Honda, Toyota, BMW, Mercedes, General Motors combined. And you could argue the reason they're successful is because they have new people with new ideas, and all the investors are saying, I'm investing in them because they can innovate. And all those companies that have been around 100 years that are retaining their people are struggling to innovate because they only know how to do it their way. And in this economy, that's why I'm saying it's not a liability to have higher turnover as much as in the past, because new people with new ideas and new ways of solving problems is a strength, right? Now, I don't know what that Mason-Dixon line is of the right number or the wrong number. And I ask leaders, well, how long should someone stay in your company? They usually say, I don't know, just longer than they are now. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And the answer usually is, well, it depends. That's right, it depends. So your goal is to build value. Today, in a fluid, unpredictable, fast-changing world of work, new people with new ideas can be a real competitive advantage. Your challenge is getting them on board quickly and deconstructing work so it doesn't take someone 2 years to learn how to make a difference. Just like the basketball team. Coaches have basketball. I got 3 months to build a world-class team every year. So I better have a simpler offense and a simpler defense. If I go through my 3 years for you to understand my offense, it's not going to work, right? And you look at who won the national championship here, Florida this past year against Duke. Now, Duke had a whole bunch of freshmen, younger, and Florida had like 24, 25-year-olds, big guys who physically had been around a lot longer, and they wound up winning. But they're both almost brand new teams. So super interesting. And what Florida had was just more veterans, not that they had played together more. They're just a little bit more physically, seasoned. Super interesting.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it is nuanced. Because if you're running, say, a landscape business or a seasonal business, your retention's not going to be great, and it's not something you can control as much. So you got to know what's right for your industries. Like for me, the reason I was so focused on retention in the financial advisory world, for advisors anyhow, not necessarily staff, but advisors, if we got them to 5 years, it was damn near 100% retention ratio. And the reason it was is because they have recurring revenue that comes in that basically almost always grows, unless they just completely take off the gas. So that's why I was so hyper-focused on it. But it's going to be industry-specific, culture-specific. I'm glad you brought that up.
And the biggest rub that I find with people is like, hey, let's talk about retention and the age-old debate. Like, hey, the CFO comes to the CEO and says, hey, all these people are leaving and we're paying all this money to train them. They're like, that's a lot of money walking out the door. And then the CEO says, hey, what if we don't train them and they stay? Like, what are you going to do?
I use that all the time. I love it.
I love that one. And, it's like, we know they're going to go. So it's, how do we optimize for performance? We have all been taught the team that stays together longest is usually the one that outperforms. Why? Trust is greater, knowledge is greater, the cultural, trust is greater. That's why they perform greater. But now we have, I'll list them out: Uber, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Airbnb, Netflix. Their median tenure is 4 years right now. They are not crushing it and not innovating and not creating because of all those 30-year employees. They're creating because they've got lots of new people who've been in different industries looking to solve the problem differently. And that's powerful, and something that, I think so people sort of scratch their heads like, I'm going to debunk that long tenure is the only way to go. Don't get me wrong, I want my best people to stay as long as possible, right? But it doesn't mean that's the only pathway to value creation today, right?
Yeah, actually, it reminds me, you may be familiar with Epic Systems. Mm-hmm. They're electronic medical records. So they're in my backyard. And they have a tenure basically of about 5 years. And they're recruiting across the country, all the top schools. And they created a policy where you get a month sabbatical, paid sabbatical at 5 years. The vast majority, I used to know the percentage, but it is the majority, do not return from that sabbatical. They quit. But that means that the vast majority of their tenure is their 5 years, and then they're continually bringing in a new crop of talent for new ideas, new creation, and continuing the pipeline. And they continue to grow. They're hiring 2 to 5 people a day. They're at 12,000 employees now and growing still.
Yeah. What's fascinating? You reminded me of a conversation I had with a CEO in Canada one time. He goes, sabbatical, I got rid of it. I said, well, why? He goes, because I'm paying people to find another job. Why do I want to do that? That was in the 90s. So, but listen, a lot of people want to blame the young generation for this high turnover. And I'm trying to say, hit pause on that thought for a second. When I started my career, I found it through a newspaper advertisement. Okay. That's how I found jobs. Today, there are more new industries. There's more transparency to opportunity. There's more companies recruiting in different parts of the world that they couldn't reach before, thanks to the pandemic, raising the comfort of hiring people remotely. There's more choices and places people can see where they can go than any time in history. You can't expect someone's not going to look at the buffet table after they've been eating in their mom's basement for 20 years and say, I want to taste something different. You can't blame that. You can't expect people are going to stay 15, 20, 30 years when they have all this new choice and opportunity. It's going to happen. So I'm trying to help leaders understand, expect it. Don't say, oh my God, Susan left. She's the only person that knew how to do that. Yeah, but she was here 4 years. You knew she was going to go. So why didn't you get on top of that, right? That's on you. not on her. I was at dinner a few weeks ago in Atlanta, head of manufacturing for this company that they do all the packaging for potato chips in America, right? The guy looks like he was going to stroke out. I'm like, bro, you okay? He's like, I just lost my top machinist. It took me 7 years how to train him, and he just quit. I'm like, what possibly in a chip packaging manufacturing plant takes 7 years to learn? I go, can't you get like 6 people to learn in like 3 months how to do that? And it was just like, nope, he couldn't wrap his head around that. I'm like, well, you're just going to have a self-inflicted wound the next time you hire someone. There's no one's going to stay 7 years. This is not a generation. It's a world of work that's presenting more choice than it ever has before. And that's hard. Not only can I see more opportunities, I can see how you're paying. I can see what your culture's like. I can see what your turnover numbers are. I can see what your leadership investment in the company is or how they're selling shares. I can see so many things I couldn't see before that are going to, complicate my decision-making tree, right? So interesting.
Without even stepping in the door, because we can go to ChatGPT and ask.
Right.
You and I, as consultants, don't even have to step in the door to know all that. We can just go right to ChatGPT, research your company, and it'll tell us everything.
I know, and that creates what a lot of researchers in this space are calling career paralysis. Not only is it hard to make a choice, like this as a salesperson, is it easier to sell someone when there's 3 choices or 50? 3. And now you got all these career choices. So here's an interesting stat. More students are changing majors in colleges right now than any time in history. Why? Because they're not sure what they should study for all these new industries that are coming up. They're like, should it be like crypto or, blockchain or like, what am I going to study? Right. And so that's interesting to me because you usually think I should study to prepare me most for the future. And what I'm trying to tell students is anyone who'll listen to me, and I speak to a lot of campuses for free around the world. I'm like, listen, I know what you need to study. The capacity to learn new stuff. That's what you need to study. Don't go chase something, right? Did you see the article in the Wall Street Journal that just came out that said the hottest new AI skill in 2023 was prompt engineer? It's obsolete now. You don't need it. The hottest job that everyone was posting and wanting isn't needed anymore. That's 2 years ago. That's the world we're in now. So your capacity to learn new stuff, that's your superpower, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just like you learned in Silicon Valley, that I try to teach people here in the Midwest is to remain agile. Be hard on your goal and your vision and be really flexible in your means on how to get there.
100%.
So with our closing up here, you have such an intimate knowledge of LinkedIn, and it's changed so much from just being the recruiting feature or site to now being that plus social media plus knowledge. Like I love LinkedIn for a variety of reasons. For the best leaders, companies, entrepreneurs out there, how should they be using LinkedIn right now to its max capacity?
I think use it to be the voice to reach candidates, investors, supporters, so that they find you. That's what you want to be. Get your message out there. I'm like you. I'm on it so many times a day, and I'm not recruiting anything. I'm there reading, absorbing knowledge, hearing what people are saying, and I think the best companies that are leveraging it right now are using it to make themselves a magnet for talent. And there's lots of different ways to do it, right? The challenge LinkedIn has, honestly, is that there's still a lot of pollution in there that is created by the members. Like I don't know about you, but I get all these offers to recruit me, and I'm like, did you even look at my profile? Like, there's no way I'm interested in that. Like, get out of here. Stop polluting the waters. But LinkedIn wants you using the tool, right? So they're making money with the advertisers. The more people are using the stuff, so it's a tough model.
It is. The one thing that I've never figured out about it is, unlike the other platforms, I think 90% of my feed is people I don't know versus, say, Facebook, it's 90% that I do know. And that could be a blessing and a curse, right? I'm getting exposed to different people, but I rarely see the things that I want to see from the people that I do know and are connected to or follow.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting. I think that's a feature they should think about, like how can I distill my feed? So for example, when I went independent, if I speak at a conference, I'm going to get, a few hundred requests to connect. Am I going to say no to those? Of course not. I'm going to say yes. I don't know you, but you want to follow me and you connect with me, I'm not going to say no. So I would say I don't know 90% of the people. And in the beginning of LinkedIn, that's not what we wanted. We wanted people like only connect with the people you know. What I wish LinkedIn would do was let me invisibly tier my network. These are the people I really
Yeah.
care about. These are people I have no clue. Like, how many times does someone reach out to you say, "Hey, can you introduce me to so and so?" Like, I could, but I never met that person, man. That is a completely cold connection,
Yeah.
right? And now
Yeah.
it's wasting my time, wasting their time. So that would be really nice if they could come up with a way to do that. The other feature, and this is a cool one, which I proposed, but they didn't take it up, was imagine if in our LinkedIn profile we put who we worked for and what years we worked for them. Imagine the data you could have, like, hey, I worked with Jim. In fact, everyone who worked for Jim, their career arc went way up in the years after. Jim must have been doing something right, or Jim's got an eye for talent, or he's a good coach, right? Like, so for example, I worked for this woman at Electronic Arts, Gabrielle Toledano. She went on to be a head of HR for Elon Musk. She's probably got a book of what that experience was like. But her staff at EA went on to be head of HR at LinkedIn, head of HR at Zynga, head of HR at Living Social, head of HR at Dolby Labs, head of HR at GoPro. Like, everyone that worked for her, like, that's a great pedigree, right? And we can't.
Yeah.
The only way to
It's
do that is
it's a coach. It's like a coaching tree, right?
that's right. Like
Yeah.
take a look at Bill Walsh, right? Like,
Yep.
his tree is phenomenal, right? And so I would love if we could access something like that. That would be really interesting. It's just a small feature just to put it in there. It'd be cool.
Yeah, they could put it under the recommendations feature. But yeah, we'll chime in and tell them to create a suggestion box from smart people like Steve and I.
I hardly get any suggestions on how to do it better. Yeah.
That's right. All right. So last question I always ask people is, and this could be on anything that we've spoken of or just something that comes to your heart, but what is an unpopular belief that you hold to be true that you believe most others disagree with?
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit provocative here and steal from someone that gave me this years ago. Hard work is the key to success. Not true. Not true. Hard work is the key to building trust. Trust is the key to success. And it just so happens that hard work is a great way for you to build trust, but trust is the goal, not the hard work. And I wish someone had told me that earlier, which means build a relationship. Don't just work hard, right? Because people want to look what's happening in the US government right now. Who's getting hired? People who are trusted. Any new executive
Yes.
comes in, who are they going to hire? Someone I trust. And so build those trusted relationships, because that is the magnet. You're creating a magnetism around you that other people are going to want to have a part of. And it was always about work hard, everything's going to work out. No, a lot of times it will, but it's the trust, the reason the hard work matters.
Because you can work really hard and still be a really big asshole that no one trusts.
We know a few.
No, that's yeah. That's such sage advice, man. I'm so glad, because two things came to mind. Because that really parlays well with your network is your net worth, and you don't have a great network if you're not trustworthy. And Tulsi Gabbard came to town, and I hosted an event here during the election cycle, and I had a few minutes to speak to her. And you mentioned, who's getting hired in the government right now, and I was like, so when's the last time you've been back home to Hawaii, and when do you get to go home? She goes, well, hopefully I don't, because that means we lost. And I said, well, tell me more about, what's different this time, and how this goes, and how that transition if Trump wins. And she goes, well, when he won in 2016, he didn't know who to trust. He was immediately surrounded by, oligarchs, media people, all the deep state, politicians, and they're in his ear. This time he has the whole team built out. He knows who he can trust, and they're coming in, and so we're hitting the ground running from day one, assuming he wins. And so, to your point on who to trust and your network and stuff of that nature, that she told me that literally from her mouth.
And the speed that they have realized in a network of trusted, confidants is just mind-boggling, right? It's just like, it's hard not to be impressed by the speed with which they've operated. Like, no government's operated like that in the U.S. ever, I don't think, right? I mean, I've been following it.
Not in our lifetime.
Just like phenomenal, and good for you. You got a plan and you're executing on it. Like, go. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of it will work and some of it won't. And like, it's hard for the media can't even keep up. Like, I think it was just yesterday or the day before where the media was reporting that Mike Walls got fired. Well, that actually wasn't the case. Mike Walls was getting moved to be the UN ambassador. So they couldn't even keep up with that transition. They run with the story and say, hey, Walls is getting fired. Nope, he was actually just, I don't know if it's a promotion or a lateral move, but either way, that wasn't the case. The media can't even keep up with their speed.
I know. Interesting, man. Super interesting.
So where can the audience follow you, and where's the best place to buy the book, Workquake?
Quake's available anywhere books are sold. If the bookstore doesn't have it, they can order it for you, but Amazon's there. My website, stevecadigan.com. I've got a TikTok channel too if you want some humor. I've got a series there called True Stories from Corporate America. Stories that are so crazy you know they're true. And you can also email me, steve@cadiganventures.com.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard the man. Give him a follow. And if there's something particularly you took away from today, or if you want that free resource that he mentioned, make sure you hit him up. Spartans, share this episode far and wide. This was an awesome conversation. Really appreciate Steve's time and wisdom. Remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today. All right, we're off.
Being from Wisconsin, did they give you crap that you've got a moniker after Michigan State? The Spartans. Like, what's going on with that?
No, actually, they don't. But I named my coaching and consulting company Kairos, which is an ancient Greek word as well as Old Testament word, both meaning the time is now, a moment in time. The biblical version is a divine moment when God acts. And then I crafted, I'm not actually Greek at all. I just fell in love with some ancient Greek, history. And so I started, all my core values are translated into Greek. And as I was thinking about it, I was looking at Spartan leadership, because my genius has been in leadership for over the last 20 years. I was like, Spartan leadership. Go and search on podcasts, not taken. I was like, all right, I'll take that.
No, it's
and
really
that was really where it came.
The term Spartan. I'm just thinking about this now. I mean, it really connotes history, strength. Warrior sort of like there's a lot of spirit behind that. Wow, I can't believe it wasn't like when I came up with the title for my book, Workquake. I was like, oh, that's got to be out there. Like, nope. One dude had published something, Workquake, and his lock on that had expired. So I'm like, how can that be possible? And they said, by the way, you can't trademark a name of a book, right? There's books. You've probably searched for a book one time and seen there's 6 different books with the same title, right? So I was really surprised that was still out there. I was like, this is exactly what I want. And I had written the whole book without a title. And then I found some woman who does names for podcasts and things. And she's like, took me through this great process. Like, if your book was a person, who are other book titles that you like? Who are authors that you like? Like, what are the meta points of the book? And it was like, I don't know, half-hour conversation. And the next day she's like, okay, here's 50 book titles. Like, oh my God. Now, this is before ChatGPT, mind you, right? Like, I don't know that I would need to hire someone, today. Like, I just used ChatGPT last night to write I got remarried 7 years ago. It's our anniversary next week. And I told the ChatGPT everything that my wife and I had done this year and our kids had done. And it came up, bro, with the most amazing poem. I'm just going to blow her mind. I'm going to be like, I'm going to be the king of the house for weeks when she sees this poem. I was like, I can't believe how good this is. And it's just like,
what are you going to put on?
Well, so it's like,
are you putting it on a,
well, that's the next
blanket, a poster, whatever.
Next thing, right? So I was like, give me like an affordable, but really cool, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to frame this thing? Cause I want to do this every year. So I don't want it too big. But I want something that's really memorable, right? And so it's like, here, go to Canva, go to do that. There's all kinds of things it can do. But bro, and I asked it, give me 3 different versions. Oh, so good, so good. Yeah,
it's amazing. I just started. Have you ever interacted with Carrie Oberbrunner? He owns Igniting Souls. That's who's publishing my book right now. It should release in August. And going through that whole editing process as we speak. I did the same thing, wrote the whole book without a title. And so we're going through that. So I think the title is going to be the Kairos Code. But it's fascinating to go through that process and think through titles and think through the whole ball and wax. But the reason I brought his name up is he created instant IP. And so he's utilizing blockchain to be able to, for in seconds, like essentially trademark and blockchain for, that immutable timestamp forever on your stuff. Now, I think I haven't done the research on this yet or asked him personally. You may, if you're trying to get it through the UTPSO, you're still going to have to go through that process. But that process can take 12 to 18 months and a few $1,000. Whereas this is like, okay, we're getting it marked like this is yours while you potentially go through that process. And it takes a few seconds and $97.
Wow.
And he's worked with Dan Sullivan and Maxwell and some others. And when he brought this idea to Sullivan, it wasn't fully baked. Sullivan, being the coach that he is, like, go back to work. And then he went back to work, got it all done. And Sullivan's like, now you're onto it. This is genius.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's so cool. I know. Man, it's great to be on your show.
Well,
really,
good.
really appreciate it. Yeah, great conversation.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. It was an awesome conversation.
This is Sparta!